Hello everyone, welcome. We're just gonna let people roll into the room, so we'll get going in a minute or two. Seeing some familiar names coming in, so hi, welcome everyone. I'm just gonna let people keep filtering into the room, so we'll just be a moment. Welcome to those joining now. Again, we'll get started in just a minute. Right, people are still rolling in. Welcome, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us on your lunchtime. Hopefully, you're sat there with a nice sandwich or bowl of pasta or something to sit and eat and take all this information in. Bro, well, we'll just get going, and we'll let more people sort of come in as the session goes on. But say hi, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for this first session in our new political education webinar series, Visions for a Global Green New Deal. My name is Tyrone Scott. I'm the Senior Movement Building and Activism Officer at War on Want, and I'll be introducing today's session, but after that, I'll be passing over to our esteemed speakers. But please also do feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. I think the chat function's working, and say where you're from today and anything else you're looking forward to. But yeah, feel free to share who you are in the chat. But yeah, Visions and this whole series is about trying to imagine and organize for something better, about trying to build the knowledge and confidence and collective power that we need to transform our world rooted in justice, solidarity, and the collective power of the people. And over the course of this series, we'll be exploring sort of 10 core demands from that form part of War on Want's global Green New Deal framework, from reclaiming public services, ending corporate land and water grabs, to fighting for economic justice, including tax, trade, and debt, and of course, our continual fight for climate justice. And throughout this series, we'll hear from frontline organizers and movements from both the global north and south. And we hope these sessions will serve as a political education space, but also a space for building that solidarity and inspiring that collective action. Over the course of this year, each webinar is going to take place on the fourth Wednesday of every month, so we can lock that date in our diaries now, which will lead us all the way to COP30 in Brazil this November, which we know is a pivotal moment in this global fight for climate justice. And we're launching this series at a time of deep inequality and political crisis. You know, as climate breakdown accelerates and the political response continues to fall shorter and shorter, the powerful doubling down on extractive, prioritized models while people and communities are being left behind. So that's why we believe that now is not only the time to resist, but to organize around clear, justice-based alternatives. And that's what we hope we are doing with part of these conversations starting today. And today's session is all about the fight to reclaim our commons, our land, our food, our water from corporate control. And part of this conversation, we're lucky to be joined by some great speakers today who are doing this work every day, both here in the UK and around the world. And our speakers include from War on Want, Sabrina Espeleta, Jyoti Fernandes from the Landworkers Alliance, Sajeewa Chamikara from MONLAR in Sri Lanka, which is a movement for land and agricultural reform, in which we'll have interpretation too. So for Sajeewa's contribution, we'll have some not consecutive, consecutive interpretation. Couldn't quite get the technology to have the interpretation at the same time, but maybe we'll have that for next time. And we'll have Davies from the Take Back Water campaign. We will have any leftover time we'll use for a Q&A. Might not be loads of time, but throughout this, please just pop questions in the Q&A function on Zoom. It should work as well. Technology, we'll see, but it should work. And we'll try to get as many of the questions as possible at the end. But that's enough of me speaking. What I'll do is I'll hand over to our first speaker, my great colleague, Sabrina Espeleta from War on Want. So thanks again for being here, and let's get started. And I'll stop sharing my screen as well.
Thank you, Ty, and thank you everyone for being here. So I will try to be very strict with the time, so to allow everyone to speak. And I'm going to share a very brief presentation. Okay, just let me know if you can see it.
Yeah, we can see your screen. Just about to full screen the presentation.
Like this is full.
Perfect.
Okay. So basically, I wanted to give like a general photography of what is going on, because then we have fantastic speakers talking about the specific aspects of the right to land, the right to water. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about what has been happening in the recent years, and particularly the fact that it's something that doesn't come much in the news. I mean, it comes in the news, but not with a different analysis. Particularly what has been happening recently with the food price shocks. We have all seen the effects. Here there are some very recent examples. We have had egg prices soaring to 59% in the US. A loaf of bread jumped by 28% in just a year in the UK. This was around 2022, 23. And olive oil, extra virgin olive oil has gone to 16 pounds a liter in the UK. What are the reasons behind this? There are multiple causes, always. It's never always one. There is the climate crisis effect, which is really a big contributor to this. There are issues like pandemics, animal and crop diseases, like in this case, for example, this pathogen that has affected the south of Italy, Xylella pathogen that has devastated the cultivation of olives, so the production has gone down. But this is also connected with the fact that there is a monoculture production system linked to the industrial monoculture model that has provoked also this type of pathogens to develop. But there is another element which is not very discussed recently. And this element is what is being called speculation. So this financial speculation is like basically throwing fuel on a fire or on a series of multiple causes, which is climate crisis, the wars, and plant diseases, etc. Speculation, what does it mean? It means buying and selling food commodities, not to eat them or to grow them, but simply to profit from changes in price. Here is a even very interesting infographic from a recent report from Ter Solidarium Food Watch. And basically it says that in 2022, over 70% of the wheat contracts in the financial market, of the commodities contracts that were traded in the European commodities market, were not for actual trading of wheat, but for speculation. So 70%, almost 80% of the trading of wheat during that period was for speculation and not for buying and selling wheat. And this what does this provoke? This provokes spikes in the food prices globally, not only in Europe but everywhere. And this affects obviously disproportionately in different ways, different countries. Because, for example, in the UK, the proportion of food costs in the households is around 11%. But in the global south, in some sub-Saharan countries, it can go up to 60-70% of the average household expenditure. So especially in countries like North Africa or Sub-Saharan Africa, where they are highly dependent on import of wheat and other so-called commodities. This is another example of another multiple causes, wars and speculation. At the same time, you have the war in Ukraine that has spiked the prices of wheat, but at the same time they have speculated on the war to increase the prices of food. So this is just a very short photography from 2019, but then if we go back in time, we've seen, again from the same report, we have seen that there have been multiple spikes. One has been in 2007, 2008, again in 2011, and then in 2022. So there has been a increased amount of crises that have been accelerated during the last 20 years. why this has happened? It happened that basically what happened in 2008 is the financial crisis that everyone know, with the real estate bubble that has exploded. And so the financial sector has looked for new ways to make profits. So they have seen that there was an opportunity to make a lot of money in the commodity futures market. For example, wheat, soy, corn, coffee, sugar. And so these contracts that were originally used by some farmers in the US, that's always was established to manage the risk with weather patterns, changes, etc., to keep a guaranteed price, have been used more and more by speculators to make money and to bet on the price of food. And this is what has been happening in the last 20 years. But moreover, what has been happening? It has happened that there has been an increased financialization of all the processes, not only the food prices, the commodities, but also other things that they call assets, like farmland, water companies, infrastructure, and housing, etc. So this has increased exponentially since 2008. This you can see the number of contracts and funds, financial funds dedicated to investment to food and farmland. As you can see the evolution from 2005. And then again, financial sector investment, agricultural land. This is the first in the United States. And the second one, the black bars, are about the farmland investment funds on a global level, which has, again, increased exponentially since 2008. What does it mean? That basically this has had important consequences. And who are these investors? Investors, are the usual suspect, are the billionaires. But then you also have the fact that there are a lot of pension funds dedicated to these investments. So the consequences are that pension funds and asset managers invest on land across Africa, Latin America, Eastern Europe. And often the consequences are that smallholder farmers, indigenous communities, are being displaced because this land may be used for, I don't know, biofuel projects, carbon offset, and or export-oriented monocultures like soya. And another trend has been that the water has become a financial asset. So even water, which is the most fundamental of the life's need, has become part of this speculative market. We will hear more about the water, so I will not speak much on this topic, but just to mention that, for example, in 2020, the first futures market on water has been established. This means that investors can now bet on the water scarcity and the prices of water to go up and down in such an important human right like water. So today we're basically seeing entire ecosystems that are being turned into financial products, things to invest in or borrow. And so the other multiple crises that we mentioned, like the climate crisis or the food insecurity, are being exacerbated by this speculation, not only on our food prices, but on our land, whether for farm production or also for housing, on our water and on the water companies that have been privatized. So the consequences in the global south, as I mentioned, the displacement. Sometimes we see, for example, these are photos of the soy advancement, the soy frontier advancement in Brazil, which is a phenomenon that is happening a lot all across the southern core of Latin America. And then other cases like biofuel projects in Mozambique. And so this is like the bad news part. However, there have been a lot of movements that are resisting, and not only resisting the advancement of this model of industrial food production and financialization of our lives, of our human rights. So these movements, some of these movements are part of the global movement for food sovereignty. And so what are the way out? There are different solutions that have been proposed. And first of all, when it comes to food production, is the model of food sovereignty that is based on different principles. But basically, the main message is that food sovereignty enables communities to grow food that is appropriate for their lands and culture, and guarantees democratic control over how it is distributed and traded, and is a practical solution that puts power in the hands of people and not on the corporations and control of corporations, investors, financial markets, etc. So how does this practically, what does this practically mean? How it is implemented in practice on a daily basis? It means solidarity economies, it means territorial localized markets, food cooperatives, public procurement of food, so public policies towards this model of territorialized food systems. It means peasant agroecology, so a model of production that works well with nature and with people. It means recognition of peasants and food workers' rights. One of the big steps has been the enshrining for the first time the rights of water and the rights of land in a very important declaration, which is the UNDROP Declaration 2018, which is the United Nations Declaration for the Rights of Peasants and other people living in rural areas, has been signed by most of the countries across the world and ratified by some of them, but for example, the United Kingdom still hasn't signed it, so that should be something to push forward. And then seed sovereignty is the right for farmers to save, use, exchange, and replicate their own seeds instead of being forced to buy expensive and patented seeds by corporations. Another solution towards this, another alternative, is land and agrarian reform. This means policies that ensure the rights of the land rights for people who produce our food, whether they are peasants, smallholder farmers, indigenous people, and all small-scale producers that need to have access to land, water, seeds, and to their territories. Many of these demands are put forward by food sovereignty movement, and one of the most important ones on the global scale is La Via Campesina, and some of the speakers are members of the La Via Campesina. They can tell more about their organizations. And then, to finish and to keep it short, the third solution could be ending speculation and the financialization of our lives. Practically, what does it mean? Stop food speculation. Some of the food sovereignty movement demand that food should not be traded at all on stock markets. It shouldn't be treated as commodities, but as human rights. So financial firms should not have any role in the food systems and should not be allowed to bet on food prices. And the same thing, again, the financial sector should also be strictly regulated. And for some part of the movements, they require not to be allowed at all to speculate in key infrastructures and in our common goods. So this means they should not be allowed to speculate or invest/speculate in water companies, in housing, in farmland, and so on, and food commodities and commodities markets or /food. And so what does it mean also? That another solution is to work towards ensuring the right to food, land, and water, implementing this via national legislation and advocating for public ownership of our essential infrastructure and our common goods and services, for example, water. Last thing is a very long slide with text, but just a few suggestions on how you can take action, on how you can further read. I'll just leave it here so I don't, you can read about how you can be involved in the UK as whether you are a food worker or an activist or a ordinary consumer person that wants to be involved more actively in a more just food system in the UK. And also always remember to be sensitive to international solidarity, that even in the worst moments of crisis, like the one we are living at the moment, we should never stop being internationalist, even in these difficult moments. So I'll keep the slide here. So if anyone wants to follow any links or anything, I hope I respected the time, and thank you very much.
Great. Thanks so much, Sabrina. And definitely respect the time, just in time. And I've seen a few comments in the chat and the Q&A, so don't worry. There's a lot of information to take in. So, we'll send over, all the key resources, a recording of this session as well. So anything you've not been able to access, and we'll send some links out throughout the call as well. So that's a really good point. But yeah, sorry, the chat was closed at the start. Please continue to engage. And no one, we're definitely not alone. There's 79 of us here on the call. And maybe for the next one, we'll change the function to a meeting function so everyone can maybe see each other as well. So it feels more communal. But yeah, thanks so much, Sabrina. And it was really clear the sort of systems at play that make it so difficult for us to have that access and that clear right to our food, land, and water. And as we touched on towards the end of that, the agrarian policy reform that's needed. Maybe it's the perfect segue to move to introduce our next speaker, who can speak more on that, on the reform that's needed in the UK and campaigns for land justice. So I'll pass over to Jyoti Fernandes from the Landworkers Alliance. And once again, I'll stop talking and take up space, and I'll pass over. Thanks, Jyoti.
Hiya, hiya. Sorry, there's a big, don't know why, my skylights coming across the screen. Hello, everybody. Yeah, I'm from the Landworkers Alliance, which is a union for farmers, foresters, and land-based workers based here in the UK. Yeah, I've been busy out on my farm this morning because at our farm we have a place called the Land Skills Hub, which is a hub where using popular education methods, much like Via Campesina uses all across the world, we try and teach land skills, and that's like building, growing, food, how to process that food, all the different skills that have to do with working with the land to provide for our basic needs. But we combine that together with political education so that when people are learning these skills, they also understand the land use system that we operate within, the political system, the injustice that's out there in the world, and where we fit into it, and not only figure out how to do things like build a natural building, but also how to fight to have a structure and a world system that's fair for everyone, so that we treat land as something that's there for the common good, something that we all need to have a stake in looking after and think about on a broad scale, and not just on a national scale, but on a global scale, as something that is our common treasury that we can use as the source of all economic wealth, really, something that we nurture and look after so that we have a way to survive as a species from generation to generation. And so at the Land Skills Hub, we have these deep conversations while we're busy chiseling out bits of wood. Right now, we're building a bunkhouse. So I came running in from the fields where we're building a timber structure from local logs in a forest that's a community-owned forest, where people actually fell the trees without fossil fuels. They use like a two-person saw, extract with a horse. We've bought that for the timber from them, and then we're using it here on our own farm to build a facility where people can come and learn about how to become a farmer or a forester or somebody that's skilled in working together with land. So yeah, I just thought I'd give you that introduction to as a bit of an idea of what, as Landworkers Alliance, we do. We work together as a union of people who are land workers here in the UK to try and work as a social movement so that we're supporting each other in doing what's often quite a difficult thing in working the land, and also to work together politically to try and gain power. And a big part of that struggle is for land rights, because without land, without access to land, as communities, as people working in cooperatives, as individuals who are thinking of the common good, it's really difficult to produce the food or the housing that we need sustainably. And that's a huge part of the struggle. So we're a part of La Via Campesina globally. All of what the previous speaker spoke about with the Declaration of Peasants' Rights is very much applicable to us, even though in the UK we're in a very different situation, and that to many parts of the world, and that many people were removed from the land years and years ago. There was a process called the enclosures where peasants were dispossessed from the land. Many people were pushed into factory work and in industrial centers, moving from an economy centered around localized food, land-based food economies, through this process. And the UK also is deeply embedded in removing people from the land all over the world, through the process of colonialization. You know, so much of the land that particularly people from diaspora communities who live here, but people that are part of formerly colonized places was maybe land that was there to provide food security or other goods that communities needed for themselves. It was changed in its usage to goods that could be exported across the world. And companies like the East India Tea Company and many, many others benefited from expropriating land in many ways and getting people who were dispossessed from ownership of the land to often come back and work on that land, often in very exploitative conditions, which is a situation that still exists in agricultural economies all over the world, with the global market economy as well. But the UK is really, you know, very dependent on this land expropriation all over the world, not just here, but all over the world. And so land rights is a huge part of the struggle to get us back to a land use system that's fairer and a food system that's much fairer as well. So thinking to how this applies here in the UK, right now there's a cost of living crisis when so many people are facing, you know, very high food prices, in combination with low wages, high costs of rental for housing, and many other, you know, high costs of living, because so much of what we need in our daily life has been changed from something that is treated as a commons or provided for based on a rights-based approach to something that's supposed to be being provided by a market-based economy. And we know that the market-based economy actually, it generates a lot of wealth for people, but it doesn't make it so that it's affordable for everybody to be able to get their basic needs met. And within Landworkers Alliance, we fight heavily for the right to food, a rights-based approach to food, where food isn't just a commodity. It isn't something that you need to pay loads of money for, but it's something that's there because it's providing for our basic human need. It's our basic human right to food. And it used to be that every country had a set of policies which were designed so that land was used appropriately so that we could provide the food necessary to have domestic food security, and that there was healthy, affordable food that was accessible to everyone there, no matter how rich they were or where they lived. And that was, you know, a basic sort of right to food premise to governance of our food system. And within that, it was also the acknowledgement that farm workers and farmers needed to have a decent livelihood. So they needed fair prices and a fair market for what they're producing. And farm workers should be guaranteed a decent livelihood and a decent wage and decent working conditions for being able to produce that food, because they're providing for one of our most important basic human needs. Now, those policies, which are a combination of different things, some of are a combination of different things. Some of it's land use frameworks. So looking at the overall land usage within a certain territory and deciding what's the most appropriate use of that land so that we can be making sure we have enough dedicated to the different sorts of food products that we need. Thinking about how that food is produced, you know, is it polluted with chemicals? Is it overly industrial and depleting the resources of the soil for future generations, etc.? And then there was also policies like market regulation policies, things that didn't allow supermarkets to play below the cost of production, that fixed prices in some ways so that farmers were guaranteed the right price for what they're producing. There's things like tariffs and other sorts of trade policies that are put into place in order to protect the market for food producers within a national economy. Now, we're not talking about the sort of tariffs that Trump's putting into place. We're talking about tariffs that are there to protect farmers' livelihoods. So it means like if you have a certain amount of milk being produced in a country, then a tariff would be put on milk that was coming in from elsewhere, particularly milk that was being produced to lower standards, so that it wouldn't be dumped onto a market and mean that farmers can't get a fair price for what they're producing. There was also things like subsidies, basic income for farmers, all sorts of policies, and particularly regulation and taxation of places that are doing the wrong sort of farming, and multinational corporations that are trying to do things. Now, these kind of regulations, which we call right to food policies, public procurement is also another one, have been really difficult to hold in place and to further and to become, more kind of mature as time goes on, because the whole global economic system forces countries to remove these policies. And a lot of that is because we've become integrated into the World Trade Organization. There's multinational corporations all the time lobbying to have these sorts of protectionist policies removed so that multinational corporations can benefit from the globalized food system. And that's the food system that treats food as a commodity. Now, here in the UK, it's really important that we start to think again about how we have these right to food policies in place, because farmers are finding it incredibly difficult to make a living. There's new policies which were tried out, which are about paying farmers so that they can farm in an environmentally friendly way. The budgets for that were not big enough to be able to bridge the gap between what farmers weren't getting through market regulation. If supermarkets are always paying below the cost of production to farmers, if cheap produce can come in from big factory farms abroad or places where environmental regulations are really low and they get dumped on the UK market, then farmers who are trying to maintain high animal welfare standards or high environmental standards will find it very, very difficult to compete. If constantly there's this global marketplace where supermarkets can source from anywhere where the labor standards are really low or environmental regulations are really low, then it means we'll never be able to get a fair price to subsidize farmers being able to get a good price, but also farm workers being able to be treated decently and to achieve fair wages. And so those kind of right to food policies are at the heart of what we need in order to get a more equitable, just food system and also a land use system that works for everyone. So at the moment, the Labour Party is put out for a consultation to try and get a land use framework together. The Landworkers Alliance has just released a report called Share the Land, which models what an agroecological land use system for the UK would look like. So that it puts out numbers for how much land we need dedicated to which food crops, how those food crops could be distributed through localized food systems, and how many imports we'd need and how those imports would need to be traded fairly, but how we could get nearly 80% self-sufficiency in food production in the UK through localized agroecological food systems. And I recommend highly that you look at this report, feed into the government's land use framework consultation, because this is step one towards having good right to food policies in place, is to look at having a land use commission and based on a land use framework which really values workers' livelihoods, values fair share of land, values combining the usage of land with nature and production and jobs. And we can have them all. We don't need to have land that's intensively farmed on one side and big nature reserves on the other side where humans aren't really involved in that. What we need is nature and humans to work together on land, thinking about it in the context of a common treasury for all of us, and get economic growth where we have loads of jobs doing everything we need to manage our forests, to manage our landscapes, to manage our wildlife, to produce really good quality, healthy, affordable, sustainable, high animal welfare food. And think about all these things together, and all of this is possible. We've modeled how it can be done. And now it's just, us mobilizing, banding together to try and fight for the right to food and a fair land use framework for everyone. So a good start on this is on Saturday. The Landworkers Alliance, along with many other organizations, is going to be marching in London. It's a march called Food in Our Hands. Please look it up and please join us, because it's a way to meet loads of other people that are involved in this food system reform, from people who eat food, who care about food equity, who care about land justice, to people who care about how this impacts people all across the world, and feel ourselves as a movement that can really take power back somehow and articulate a real vision of where we're going. We're not just fighting for one policy, not just bring back SFI or try and set up this particular grant. It's about the whole package of a new way of looking at land and looking at food and justice, a way we order a society where everybody works together. And it's a really good start if we get involved in that. The other thing I'd like to invite you to do is get involved in the Landworkers Alliance. You can join as a producer, but you can also join as a supporter member. And we have a land skills fair, a festival dedicated to bringing together people that are interested in all of this from July 11th to 13th. So do come along to that, and you can get deeply involved in our movement. And it's so much fun. It's just vibrant, joyous, everything.
Bro, thank you so much, Jyoti. And please, do get involved with the Landworkers Alliance. Do attend on Saturday if you can. We'll send all the details around us again after the call, and we've popped a few links in the chat as well. So yeah, please do engage. And also welcome to the newcomers. We're now over 80 people in the call, and looking at the chat, we seem to be from all over the place, which is brilliant. We have people from Essex, from Southwest Scotland, from Liverpool, people in the chat from Sri Lanka, and someone just joined the chat from Almeria in Southeast Spain as well. So absolutely fantastic to see that spread, but also, kind of sits into the fact that we need a global movement, and we need international solidarity, and we need to learn lessons from our movements around the world. As our fights for land justice here in the UK are fights that people have been having for a long time all over the world, and we can all learn lessons from each other and build genuine solidarity with each other to be able to fight against these unjust systems. And another joining here from Brazil and from Cornwall as well. So it really is a great spread, and it shows that our movement touches all corners, and hopefully we can continue to move forward with that same sort of approach. But with that, that makes me very excited to introduce our next speaker from the Movement for Land and Agricultural Reform, MONLAR in Sri Lanka, Sajeewa Chamikara, and there will be interpretation from Lakpriya as well. So yes, I'll pass over to Sajeewa. Thank you.
බොහොම ස්තුතියි.
Thank you to everyone.
මම උත්සාහ දරනවා පොඩි වෙලාවක් ඇතුළත ලංකාවේ කොයි ආකාරයටද මේ ඉඩම් කොල්ලේ හරහා ඇති වෙලා තියෙන ජලය, ඒ වගේම ෆුඩ් සවර්නිටි එකට, ඒ වගේම ලංකාවේ විශේෂයෙන්ම ඉඩම් සහ මේ ආහාර පද්ධතියට වෙලා තියෙන බලපෑම් පිළිබඳව කරුණු ටිකක් ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න උත්සාහ දරනවා.
I'm trying to give it in a short moment. What has happened in Sri Lanka with regard to land grabbing and how it has affected the food of people, the land, the light water, and economies, how it has impacted.
මම මුලින්ම පොඩි අදහසක් දෙන්න උත්සාහ කරනවා. ලංකාවේ මේ විශේෂයෙන්ම ඉඩම් ක්‍රියාවලිය හරහා ආහාර පද්ධතියට, ඒ වගේම ජල පද්ධතියට ඇතිවන බලපෑම් පදනම් වෙන හේතු කාරණා කීපයක් මූලිකව ඉදිරිපත් කරන්න උත්සාහ දරනවා.
I'm trying to give an overview of the impact on water and land because of the current economic model.
විශේෂයෙන්ම ලංකාව ගත්තාම ලංකාව බයෝඩයිවර්සිටි හොට්ස්පොට්, ලෝකයේ තියෙන බයෝඩයිවර්සිටි හොට්ස්පොට් 36 අතරින් එකක් විදියට ලංකාව හඳුනගෙන තියෙනවා.
Sri Lanka is known as one of the biodiversity hotspots out of 38 such biodiversity hotspots in the world.
36 biodiversity hotspot.
on 36 biodiversity hotspots.
මෙතෙන්දී විශේෂත්වය වෙන්නේ ලංකාව බයෝඩයිවර්සිටි හොට්ස්පොට් 36 අතරින් එකක් තත්වයට පරිවර්තනය වීමේදී තියෙන ප්‍රධානම තත්වය තමයි මේක සතුටු වෙන්න නෙමෙයි තියෙන්නේ තාම කනගාටුදායක තත්වයක්. මොකද හේතුව තමයි බයෝඩයිවර්සිටි හොට්ස්පොට් 36 අතරින් එකක් බවට ලංකාවපත් වෙන්න ප්‍රධානම හේතුව වෙලා තියෙන්නේ ලංකාවේ මුළු භූමි ප්‍රමාණයෙන් පෙර පැවති ස්වභාවික පරිසර පද්ධති මුල් තිබිච්ච තත්වයෙන් 70%කට වැඩි ප්‍රමාණයක් හායනය කර ගැනීමේ ප්‍රතිඵලයක් විදිහට තමයි මේ බයෝඩයිවර්සිටි හොට්ස්පොට් 36 අතුරින් එකක් තත්වයට පරිවර්තනය වෙන්න එක ප්‍රධාන හේතුවක් වෙලා තියෙන්නේ.
Why, although it is being called a biodiversity hotspot, why it is not a heartfelt thing to be happy about? Because that also means that the biodiversity has been destroyed for generations now. Sri Lanka's biodiversity has been all over the place, all over the country, and now it's reduced by 70%. So that's what it means when it becomes named as a biodiversity hotspot.
අපි මෙතෙන්දී විශේෂයෙන් වැදගත් වෙනවා ලංකාවේ මේ විශාල ජෛව විවිධත්වයක් වගේම මේ පද්ධතිය තුල, ඒ කියන්නේ ලංකාව තුල විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ ස්වභාවික පද්ධති මත තමයි කුෂිකර්මාන්තය, ඒ වගේම ආහාර ස්වෛරී භාවය, ඒ වගේම ජල සුරක්ෂිතතාවය, ඒ වගේම කාලගුණික දේශගුණික සුරක්ෂිතතාවය මේ සියලුම දේවල් පැඳිලා තියෙන්නේ ලංකාවේ තියෙන මේ විශාල ක්ලයිමැටික් ඒ වගේම ජියෝග්‍රැෆිකල් ඩයිවර්සිටි එක මත ඒ ඩයිවර්සිටි එක මත තියෙන ස්වභාවික සම්පත් මත තමයි මේ සියලුම දේවල් රැඳිලා තියෙන්නේ.
Why it's grave is that all these different biodiversity zones is where people depend for their food sovereignty, the land, the water, and their economy and livelihoods. So this is what is being devastated and degraded.
ලංකාවේ අපි දන්නවා ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන්ම මේ ආකාරයෙන් ක්ලයිමැටික් සෝන් හතරක් පිහිටලා තියෙනවා. වෙට් සෝන් එක, ඉන්ටර්මීඩියට් සෝන්, ඩ්‍රයි සෝන් සහ එරිඩ් සෝන් කියලා කලාප හතරක් තියෙනවා. ඊට අමතරව ලංකාවේ වෙරළබඩ කලාපය, ඒ වගේම මධ්‍ය කඳුකරය මේ ආකාරයෙන් ගත්තහම ඊටාම භූගෝලීය වශයෙන් සහ දේශගුණික වශයෙන් ලොකු විවිධත්වයක් තියෙනවා. මේ විවිධත්වයක් තියෙන පද්ධති මත තමයි අපේ ස්වභාවික සම්පත් ව්‍යාප්ත වෙලා තියෙන්නේ.
And Sri Lanka's the zones of agroecological zones, there are four, as you see in the green picture: the wet zone, the intermediate zone, the dry zone, and the arid zone. And along with that, there is the coastal area around all across Sri Lanka, which gives you a diverse way of living, as much as production and nature.
මේ කියන පද්ධති තුල මේ කියන කලාප තුල මේ ආකාරයෙන් ෆොරස්ට්‍රි ඉකෝසිස්ටම් ගණනාවක් දකින්න ලැබෙනවා. මේ සියලුම පද්ධති ලංකාවේ අභ්‍යන්තර ප්‍රදේශවල ව්‍යාප්ත වෙලා තියෙනවා. මේ මත තමයි අපේ රටේ ජල සුරක්ෂිතතාවය, ඒ වගේම ආහාර සුරක්ෂිතතාවය, ඒ වගේම ආර්ථිකය කියන සමාජ ආර්ථික තත්ත්වය කියන සියලුම දේවල් බැඳිලා තියෙන්නේ මෙන්න මේ වනාන්තර පද්ධති මත.
So these are pictures of different ecosystems, the forest ecosystems that is present in different areas of the climatic zones of Sri Lanka, which gives you the different kinds of food, the different livelihoods, and the ways of living.
ඊට අමතරව ලංකාවේ තවත් ස්වභාවික පද්ධති ගණනාවක් දකින්න ලැබෙනවා. වෙට්ලන්ඩ් ඉකෝසිස්ටම්, ඒ වගේම කෝස්ටල් ඉකෝසිස්ටම්, මැරින් ඉකෝසිස්ටම් මේ සියල්ල මත තමයි අපේ රටේ පෙර සඳහන් කරපු ආකාරයෙන් ආහාර ස්වෛරී භාවය, ඒ වගේම ජල සුරක්ෂිතතාවය, ඒ වගේම කෘෂිකර්මාන්තය සහ ධීවර කර්මාන්තය ඇතුළු මේ සමස්ත ක්‍රියාවලියත් එක්ක පදනම් වෙච්ච සමාජ ආර්ථික තත්ත්වයන් සියල්ලම බැඳිලා තියෙන්නේ මෙන්න මේ ස්වභාවික පද්ධති මත.
So these are different ecosystems that produce that is there in different forms of climatic zones, which is the wetland ecosystems, the and the coastal and the marine ecosystems, which gives you the sovereignty and the abundance of water, land, and food.
මේ වගේ තියෙන මේ පද්ධති ටිකට අද වන විට අත් වෙලා තියෙන ඉරණම තමයි මම මෙතන ඉඳලා විස්තර කරන්න උත්සාහ කරන්නේ.
So I'm trying to explain from here on what has happened to these different ecosystems, the damages that is being caused.
අපේ ලංකාවේ විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ වනාන්තර පරිසර පද්ධති අද වන විට විශාල වශයෙන් ඉලිපිහිලි කිරීම වලට ලක් වෙන්නේ ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන්ම තෙත්කලාපීය වනාන්තර ප්‍රදේශවල තේ වගාව ව්‍යාප්ත කිරීම සඳහා තමයි ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන්ම මේ ආකාරයෙන් ඉලිපිහිලි කරමින් පවතින්නේ.
So since long, it has been happening that these wetland forest areas are being cleared all along and creating these green patches like you see here, which is basically for tea cultivations and other plantation crops.
විශේෂයෙන්ම බොහෝ දෙනෙක් හිතනවා මේ ප්‍රදේශ වනාන්තර වගේම කොළ පැහැයෙන් පිහිටලා තියෙන හින්දා මේවා ඊටාම ඒ කියන්නේ කොළ පැහැයෙන් තියෙන පද්ධති විදියට නමුත් විශේෂත්වය තමයි මේවා මේ කොළ පැහැයෙන් තිබුණට මේවට භාවිතා කරන අධික කෘෂි රසායනික ඒ වගේම මේවැ වනාන්තර පද්ධතියක තියෙන ආකාරයෙන් ලේයර්ස් විදිහට වනාන්තර ශාක පද්ධති සකස් වී නොතිබීම ඒ වගේම සොයිල් ඉරෝෂන් සිදුවීම ඇතුළුව මේ ක්‍රියාවලීන් වල ප්‍රතිඵලයක් විදිහට මේ කලාප ග්‍රීන් කලර් එකෙන් තිබුණට මේවා සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම සත්ව ප්‍රජාවගෙන් වියුක්ත වෙච්ච ග්‍රීන් ඩෙසර්ට් විදිහට තමයි අපිට හඳුන්වන්න පුළුවන් වෙන්නේ.
Although you see agreeable green patches like this, but it is not as beautiful as it seems because it is a loss of its biodiversity and it is being polluted with so much of chemicals being put in for cultivation of plantation crops. And the natural function of the ecosystem of different layers of vegetation is lost. And therefore, the biodiversity, which means the fauna population, is devastated. It's gone, most of it. And of course, along with it, the different kinds of food that people can have.
අද වන විට මේ තෙත්කලාපයේ පිහිටලා තියෙන වෙට් සෝන් එකේ පිහිටලා තියෙන මේ විදිහට මේ වනාන්තර ලංකාවේ ඉතුරු වෙලා තියෙන්නේ මුළු භූමි ප්‍රමාණයේ 3% ප්‍රමාණයක් ඉතුරු වෙලා තියෙන්නේ. ඉතුරු සියල්ලම ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන්ම තේ වගාව ප්‍රමුඛ වෙච්ච ඊට අපනයනයේ පදනම් වෙච්ච තේ ඒකභෝග වාණිජ වගාවක් විදිහට තේ වගාව ප්‍රමුඛ වෙච්ච ඊට අමතරව ෆාම් ඔයිල් ඇතුළුව මහ පරිමාණ වාණිජ වගාවන් කීපයකට මේ තෙත්කලාපය සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම ගුදුරු වෙලා දැනට ඉතුරු වෙලා තියෙන්නේ ලංකාවේ වැඩිම බයෝඩයිවර්සිටි එකක් තියෙන තෙත්කලාපයෙන් මුළු භූමි ප්‍රමාණයෙන් 3% පමණයි මේ විදිහට වනාන්තර ඉතුරු වෙලා තියෙන්නේ.
So these wet zone forest areas are the most biodiverse areas of Sri Lanka, but of course it is now lost, almost gone, everything. Now from the original forests, now what remains is only just about 3%, all gone because of different land use conversions like tea plantations, palm oil and other plantation crops.
ඊට පස්සේ අපි පොඩ්ඩක් බලමු අපේ ඩ්‍රයි සෝන් එකට වෙලා තියෙන තත්ත්වය ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ. එතකොට ශ්‍රී ලංකාවේ ඩ්‍රයි සෝන් එක ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන්ම මහ පරිමාණ වාණිජ වගාවන් විදිහට සමාගම් විසින් ව්‍යාප්ත කරන ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන්ම ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන්ම අපි දන්නවා බඩේරිඟු වගාවන් සඳහා ඒ වගේම උක් වගාවන් සඳහා ඒ වගේම කැවැන්ඩිස් වගේ කෙසෙල් ප්‍රභේද වගාවන් සඳහා මහ පරිමාණයෙන්ම අපේ ඩ්‍රයි සෝන් එකේ වනාන්තර එලිපෙහෙලි කිරීම සිද්ධ වෙනවා. ඒවැ ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන්ම මේ ක්‍රියාවලියේ යෙදিলা ඉන්නේ මහ පරිමාණ සමාගම්.
These are pictures from the dry zone areas. These are pictures of large-scale plantation crops again, which is degrading those land areas and the biodiversity of that. These are land uses such as sugarcane plantations, banana plantations, and corn. So these are large areas of land use conversions, which is devastating diversity in those areas.
මේ ක්‍රියාවලිය සඳහා මහා පරිමාණයෙන්ම මේ වනාන්තර එලිපෙහෙලි කරලා මේ වාණිජ වගාවන් ව්‍යාප්ත කරනවා වගේම ඒවා සඳහා ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන්ම මේ වගේ ප්‍රධාන ජල මූලාශ්‍ර වලින් මහා පරිමාණයෙන්ම ජලය ලබා ගැනීම සිද්ධ කරනවා මේ සමාගම් විසින්. ඒකේ ප්‍රතිඵලයක් විදිහට කෘෂි කර්මාන්තයේ නිරත වෙලා ඉන්න සුළු පරිමාණ ගොවීන්ට වගාබිම් අහිමි වෙනව විතරක් නෙමේ ඔවුන්ගේ කෘෂි කර්මාන්තයට තියෙන ජලය ටික පවා මේ සමාගම් විසින් මහා පරිමාණයෙන්ම ලබා ගැනීම සිද්ධ වෙනවා.
this type of large-scale land use in dry zone areas by big companies for plantation crops, not only devastates the biodiversity of it, but of course it takes resources from the people, the small farmers who are depending on the water, which is scarce in those areas. This form of cultivations erode the land so much, and along with it, the resource of water, which puts a lot of strain on small farmers for their own survival.
මේ ආකාරයෙන් අපිට පේනවා මේ ඡායාරූපවල දකින්න ලැබෙන්නේ මේ මහ පරිමාණ ඩෝල් වගේ සමාගම් ඇවිල්ලා ලංකාවේ මේ ඩ්‍රයි සෝන් එකේ අලින්ගේ නිජබිම් ඇතුළුව විශේෂයෙන්ම අලි සංක්‍රමණික පද්ධති මේවා පවා සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම එලිපෙහෙලි කරලා වගාබිම් පවත්වගෙන යනවා. ඒ වගාබිම් වලට ඔවුන්ගේ වගාබිම් වලට අලි ඇතුන් පිවිසීම වැළැක්වීම සඳහා මේ ආකාරයෙන් මහ පරිමාණයෙන්ම අලින්ට පිවිසෙන්න බැරි විදිහට විදුලි වැටවල් යොදලා තමයි සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම ඔවුන්ගේ වගාබිම් පවත්වගෙන යන්නේ. ඒකේ ප්‍රතිඵලයක් විදිහට මේ ප්‍රදේශවල ජීවත් වෙන අලි ඇතුන් සුළු පරිමාණ ගොවීන්ගේ වගාබිම් වලට පිවිසිලා දැවැන්ත හානිකර තත්වයකට ගොවි ජනතාව පරිවර්තනය වෙමින් තියෙනවා.
So this is a picture of another side of the same issue. This is in the southeast of Sri Lanka. These are aerial pictures of the dole plantation, the banana and pineapple cultivation company, the global one. This is how they clear the land. These are original forest areas, and they create monocultures. And along with it, of course, they're chasing away the biodiversity, meaning especially the large mammals like elephants who have been living there all along. They are being chased away, and they invade other little small farmers' lands and the crop areas. And of course, these plantation companies, they have so much of resources, and they will protect themselves by erecting big elephant fences, which of course prevent elephants from damaging that plantation crop. But of course, they will venture into other villages and rice crops and other small farmers' crop areas and damage them, and of course destroy their livelihoods.
මේ කුෂිකර්මාන්තයට අමතරව අද වන විට ලංකාවේ වෙරළ කලාපයේ පිහිටලා තියෙන විශේෂයෙන්ම විශාල වනාන්තර පද්ධතිය ඇතුළුව ස්වභාවික පද්ධති විශේෂයෙන්ම කුෂිකාර්මික ජනතාව අමතරව දීවර කර්මාන්තයේ නිරත ඒ වගේම සත්ත්වපාලනයේ නිරත ජනතාව භාවිතා කරන මහ පරිමාණ මේ භූමි ප්‍රදේශ මේ වන විට සමහර සමාගම් විසින් විශේෂයෙන්ම සිමෙන්ති නිෂ්පාදන කර්මාන්තශාලා සඳහා ලබා ගැනීමත් සිද්ධ වෙනවා. ඉතින් මේ වගේ තත්වයකුත් මේ ස්වභාවික පද්ධති වලට අද වන විට ලංකාවේ ඇති වෙලා තියෙන පීඩන වලින් එකක් තත්වයට පරිවර්තනය වෙලා තියෙනවා.
This is an example of another form of ecosystem in the northern part of Sri Lanka, the coastal ecosystems, how it is being damaged, and the people being chased away from their livelihoods, from their day-to-day peasant livelihoods of fisheries-based livelihoods. They are being chased away by large-scale fishing, of course, yes, and mostly also it has been attractive for companies who are producing cement to get the lime to produce the cement. So they are encroaching on the land and chasing the people away.
ඊට අමතරව අද වන විට ඒ කියන්නේ ලංකාවේ කුෂිකර්මාන්තයේ නිරත ජනතාව මුහුදට දීලා තියෙන තවත් ප්‍රධාන අභියෝගයක් විදියට තියෙනවා සෝල බලාගාර ඉදිකිරීම. දැන් මේ සෝල බලාගාර වලට ලක් වෙන්නේ කුෂිකර්මාන්තයේ නිරත ජනතාවගේ ප්‍රධාන මූලාශ්‍ර වෙච්ච එහෙම නැත්නම් කුෂිකර්මාන්තයේ ප්‍රධාන ප්‍රභවයන් වෙච්ච වැව් ඒ වගේම මේ වැව් වල ජලපෝෂක ප්‍රදේශ විදියට පිළිලා තියෙන වනාන්තර පද්ධති මහා පරිමාණයෙන්ම එලිපෙහෙලි කරමින් තමයි මේ සෝල බලාගාර ඉදි කරමින් පවතින්නේ. දැන් මේක ලංකාවේ ස්ථාන ගණනාවක ඉතාම දරුණු විදියට ව්‍යාප්ත කරන විදේශ සමාගම් ගණනාවක් ඇවිල්ලා මැදිහත් වෙමින් ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන ව්‍යාපෘති තත්වයට පරිවර්තනය වෙලා තිනවා. මේකෙන් අද වන විට සුළු පරිමාණ ගොවියා දැඩි පීඩනයකට ලක් වෙලා තියෙනවා.
And now with the invent of the new forms of economy, there is a new strain on the livelihood resources of the people. Like here that you see the picture of solar panels on reservoirs, which are the mainstay of irrigated agriculture in Sri Lanka. although Sri Lanka has a lot of a good irrigation system, ancient irrigation system, which has sustained life all along, but now it's being compromised because of these solar systems, which is not for them, of course, for the national grid, for the big cities and the factories, which is being implemented with the help of the government and big investors coming in from foreign countries, which is taking away these resources. They are taking away the fisheries livelihood on these reservoirs, as much as the levels of water that they need to keep to keep these floating solar panels afloat, so they don't release the water, so that gives a strain on the seasonal livelihood of rice farming. So that's people are standing up against it. Yes, of course.
ඊට අමතරව ලංකාවේ අද වන විට ඇති වෙලා තියෙන තව ප්‍රධානම අභියෝගයක් තමයි වෙරළ කලාපය තුළ මේ තියෙන ඛනිජ සම්පත් ලබා ගැනීම සඳහා දීවර බිම් සම්පූර්ණයෙන්ම මයිනින් කරලා මේවැය තියෙන ඛනිජ ද්‍රව්‍ය ලබා ගැනීමේ ව්‍යාපෘති ගණනාවක් දැනට සැලසුම් වෙලා තියෙනවා ලංකාව වටාම තියෙන වෙරළ කලාපයේ ස්ථාන ගණනාවක මහ පරිමාණ සමාගම් කීපයක් විසින් මේ වෙරළ කලාපයේ එහෙම නැත්නම් දීවර ජනතාව භාවිතා කරන මේ ප්‍රදේශ මයිනින් කිරීම එහෙම නැත්නම් මේ ඛනිජ ද්‍රව්‍ය ලබා ගැනීම සඳහා කැනීම් කිරීමේ ව්‍යාපෘති ගණනාවක් ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න සැලසුම් වෙලා තියෙනවා මේ දීවර කර්මාන්ත නිරත ජනතාව විශාල ප්‍රමාණයක් අවතැන් කරමින්.
And here's another form of resource grabbing. Sri Lanka is known for golden beaches, but of course there are the black beaches, which is of course full of minerals. And this has become attractive for companies to come and invest and mine all this sand, and which will, of course, degrade the coastline and create havoc on the routine pattern of life for the fishermen.
විශේෂයෙන්ම මේ තත්වයන් ඇති වෙන්න ඒ කියන්නේ ලංකාව ප්‍රතිපත්තිමේ මේ ආකාරයෙන් මහා පරිමාණ කුෂිකර්මාන්තයේ ඒ වගේම මහා පරිමාණ ආයෝජන ක්‍රියාවලීන් වලට නතු වෙන්න ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන්ම හේතු සාධක කීපයක් බලපාලා තියෙනවා. මොකද හේතුව තමයි ලංකාවේ අපි දන්නවා ණයවලට ගොදුරු වීම ඇතුළුව මේ ක්‍රියාවලීන් වල ප්‍රතිඵලයක් විදියට විශේෂයෙන්ම අපි දන්නවා ලෝක බැංකුව ඒ වගේම IMF එක මේ ආයතන මහා පරිමාණින්ම ලංකාවේ ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න ප්‍රතිපත්තිමය ව්‍යුහයන් ගොඩනගන්න උත්සාහ දරන්නේ මහා පරිමාණ වාණිජ කුෂිකර්මාන්තය සඳහා ඒ වගේම මහා පරිමාණ ආයෝජන ක්‍රියාවලීන් සඳහා ඒවට අවශ්‍ය කරන පෙළඹවීම කරනවා ඒ වගේම ප්‍රතිපත්තිමය ව්‍යුහයන් ගොඩනැගීමේ ක්‍රියාවලියක් ඇති කරනවා ඒ කිරීමේ ප්‍රතිඵලයක් විදිහට තමයි මේ තත්වයන් දිගින් දිගට වර්ධනය වෙන්නේ ඒ සඳහා ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන්ම බලපාන්නේ ලෝක බැංකුව ඒ වගේම IMF කියන ආයතනවල ලංකාවට දැඩි බලපෑම් කරමින් ප්‍රතිපත්තිමය ව්‍යුහයන් ගොඩනැගීම සඳහා කරන බලපෑම් ක්‍රියාවලිය හර තමයි මේ තත්වයන් ගොඩනැගෙන්න අවශ්‍ය කරන පසුබිම හැදෙන්නේ.
And how these destructive forms of land use and resource grabbing is happening is because of structural issues which Sri Lanka is faced with because of its large debt owed to international monetary fund or the systems of development which is proposed by the World Bank. They have been structured into the economic plan of Sri Lanka, which is against the will of the people, but along with the state power, it is being pushed on the throat of the people, and we are faced with large-scale repression when we go against that, of course.
අපි දකිනවා මේ විදිහට අවස්ථා ගණනාවකදී ලංකාවට World Bank එක IMF එක දෙන නිර්දේශ මත මේ සංවර්ධන සැලසුම් ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න ගිහිල්ලා එහෙම නැත්නම් ආයෝජන ක්‍රියාවලීන් එහෙම නැත්නම් වාණිජ කුෂිකර්මාන්තයේ ක්‍රියාත්මක කිරීමට උත්සාහ දැරීම හරහා තමයි අද වන විට මේ වගේ තත්වයක් අවශ්‍ය කරන පසුබිම ගොඩනැගිලා තියෙන්නේ.
In Sri Lanka, we identified the long-term development plans of the World Bank and the multilateral donors, of course, which has contributed a lot to the degradation of livelihoods and natural biodiversity as much as other resources, and the change of the economic system for the people, pushing Sri Lanka into this new age of the new Silk Road system, the massive global liberal market economic system, which is, of course, the brainchild of these institutions, global institutions like the World Bank.
අවසාන වශයෙන් අපි දන්නවා ලංකාවෙන් වියුක්ත වෙච්ච ඒ කියන්නේ ලංකාවේ සංවර්ධන ක්‍රියාවලියෙන් එළියේ තියෙන විශේෂයෙන්ම චීනයේ මැදිහත් වීම මත සිද්ධ වෙන මේ ව්‍යාපෘතියට අනුව ලංකාවේ සංවර්ධන සැලසුම් ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න ගිහිල්ලා තමයි ලංකාවේ මේ ස්වභාවික පද්ධතීන් බිඳ වැටෙමින් කුෂිකර්මාන්තය ඒ වගේම දීවර කර්මාන්තය ඒ වගේම ජන ජීවිතයේ බිඳ වැටෙන ක්‍රියාවලියක් ගොඩනැගෙන්න ඕන කරන පසුබිම හැදෙන්නේ. එතෙන්දි විශේෂයෙන්ම චීනය විසින් ඔවුන්ගේ සැලසුමට අනුව one route one belt ව්‍යාපෘතිය යටතේ සැලසුමට අනුව අපේ රට තුල සැලසුම් සකස් කළ ක්‍රියාත්මක කිරීම හරහා තමයි මේ ප්‍රශ්නයන් තවදුරටත් වර්ධනය වෙමින් පවතින්නේ.
We now clearly see that this is not the different land grabbing issues or the resource grabbing issues that we see in different parts of Sri Lanka is not separate from each other. It's all in a common plan of development, structural development, which is evident in the Sri Lanka's national physical plan, which is being developed. And it is part of a global ecosystem of economic liberalism and pushing of global the agenda of the One Belt, One Road initiative of China mainly, and of course the larger corporate sector in Sri Lanka also, which is part and parcel of that.
ඒ සඳහා සකස් කරපු සැලසුම ලංකාවේ සකස් කරලා තියෙන National Physical Plan කියලා මේ සැලසුම ක්‍රියාත්මක කරන්න යෑමේ ප්‍රතිඵලයක් විදියට තවදුරටත් ලංකාවේ මේ කුෂිකර්මාන්තයේ නිරත ජනතාවගේ ස්වභාවික සම්පත් ඒ වගේම දීවර සම්පත් ඒ විතරක් නෙමේ ලංකාවේ මේ ජෛව පද්ධතීන් එක්ක බැඳිලා තියෙන සම්පත් මේ සියල්ලම දරුණු පීඩනයකට ලක් වෙලා තියෙනවා. අද වන විට ඇති වෙලා තියෙන ගැටලු ගණනාවක් අපේ රට තුළ උද්ගත වෙන්න ප්‍රධානම පසුබිම ගොඩ නැගිලා තියෙන්නේ මෙන්න මේ සැලසුම අපේ රටෙන් වියුක්ත වෙච්ච එහෙම නැත්නම් අපේ රටේ ගොවියා දීවරයාගෙන් වියුක්ත වෙච්ච චීනයේ උමනාව මත ක්‍රියාත්මක වෙන මේ ජාතික භෞතික සැලැස්ම අපේ රට තුළ ක්‍රියාත්මක කිරීමේ ප්‍රතිඵලයක් විදිහට තමයි මේ තත්ත්වයන් ගොඩ නැගිමින් පවතින්නේ.
So this is a map that you see not so common from when you're looking from outside of Sri Lanka. This is a map of the National Physical Plan, the major development schemes that is proposed under that, and which is not known much. But this is the major plan in Sri Lanka, which is being constructed right now under all governments all through the years, and which is deadly for the small-scale farmers, fishers, and the livelihoods, the ordinary livelihoods of people. These are based on massive transportation systems and large-scale economic systems of transportation and big, huge urban areas that is being built up for this. So it has contributed definitely for the erosion of wildlife, the natural ecosystems, as much as the homely livelihoods of people.
මට ලැබිලා තියෙන කාලය අවසන් හින්දා මම මෙතනින් නතර වෙනවා. අපිට ප්‍රශ්න අහන්න තියෙන අවස්ථාවේදී තවදුරටත් පැහැදිලි කිරීම කරන්න තිබ්බ අවස්ථාවකදී මේ පිළිබඳව වැඩි විස්තර කියන්න උත්සාහ දරමින් මම නතර වෙනවා. බොහොම ස්තුතියි සියලු දෙනාටම.
So my time is up, of course. There is a lot more to say, but of course, I will wait for a question and answers time. So thank you very much for listening to me. This is what I have to say for now.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you so much, Sajeewa there. And also, Lakpriya, for the brilliant translation. It's hard enough to do that anyway, never mind with such sort of heavy and important topics to cover. So thank you so much for that and huge appreciation. And we've just seen there so sort of clearly what happens when corporations control the land systems and the degradation, environmental destruction, and the effects on communities. And here in the UK, we increasingly have corporate control of our water systems, which actually, in some ways, is causing many of the same or similar issues, showing how all of this is connected by the same systems. And with that, I'm excited to introduce our next speaker, Davies from the Take Back Water campaign. Thanks, Joe.
Hi there. Yeah. So Yeah, so I'm Joe. I'm from the Take Back Water campaign, as already been said. I'm just going to talk today a little bit about the UK water industry, kind of where we've been, and kind of what the state of play is, I suppose. Just a bit of background, Take Back Water was originally formed from sort of members from another movement called Don't Pay UK, which was pretty successful in a boycotting of utility bills, which we will be talking about a little bit later in the presentation. We recently come together again with a few other people in order to tackle the problem of the fact that water bills are rising. So, we'll talk about the privatization and the kind of disastrous consequences of that, what's been going on with the water industries, why they are in so much debt, the environmental impact of sewage releases, as well as what we can do to fight back against the issues that are arising from all of this. So the first thing is that, as we've seen a lot in this presentation from many people, water is one of those commons that affects us all, right? It is an inalienable human right that we need to have access to water. Privatization of the water industry in the UK began in 1989. And as alongside in the sort of same era under Thatcher, the privatization of utility companies as well. And to give a long story short, it's been an unmitigated disaster, the kind of, I suppose, free market dream that we would have low prices for everyone and a really good water system because of competition obviously has not worked. That kind of Thatcherite Reaganomics sort of era has clearly shown to be a bit of a farce. But it's not just the waterways, not just oceans and seas and rivers in the UK, it's also land. Groundwater is something that is pumped to be able to provide people with drinking water and sewage water. Also, many acres of land is used for sewage treatment and new industry in sort of the water space. So this is a big problem in the UK, if you didn't already know. But the environmental impact is fairly stark. The graph at the top that shows all the sort of ticks and crosses and little wrenches and things like that, those were sewage spills over just one bank holiday. Thankfully, some of them were able to be brought to what they would consider a reasonable level of sewage discharge, but you can see that plenty of them are not fixed, and they haven't been fixed still to this day. Bearing in mind, England and Wales are the only countries, or one of the very few countries that has privatized water. And even in the UK, we have countries like Scotland that do have a public water system. So this is not something that is happening everywhere. This is just in this area.
Sorry, Joe. I just noticed the screen's not shared, I don't think.
Oh, is it not?
No.
Oh, no. 1 second. Let me...
Thanks for the people in the chat. Helped us notice that.
Actually, no.
Excellent. Yes, thank you all.
There you go. Thank you so much for that. Good stuff. Okay, yeah. So thankfully you haven't missed too many actual graphs. That's good. Yeah, so about 3.61 million hours of sewage was dumped into the seas and rivers in England in just 2024. And that's not us saying that, that's data according to the Environmental Agency. So that's about 1,200 times per day, which is egregious for a country that is supposed to be one of, it's G7, it's G20, it's a developed nation, and we're still pumping raw sewage and that much raw sewage into our waterways. Now, people are getting sick, we know this. A few water sport events have had to be cancelled, including like boat races and things like that across the country, which is one of those sort of great English traditions. And people aren't able to go swimming in places they could before. I'm from Southend originally. I can't go swimming in the sea there. Friends of mine can't go swimming in the sea there. I also moved to around Cambridgeshire, and I used to go swimming in rivers and things like that. That's now heavily discouraged. And not just humans being impacted by this, but it's also the fish and other animals that rely on those water systems being clean are also being affected. Now, despite all of this, water bills have increased, and some places, supported by Southern Water, for instance, have increased by 47%. And even taking Southern Water as an example, they supply places like Southampton, who have had to have water bottles handed out to residents because their tap water was faulty, and by that I mean it was full of sewage. So this kind of wastewater mismanagement and just general water mismanagement hasn't resulted in there being a lowering of a price as you would with any other commodity like this. Any other private industry would likely have to reduce the price of something or to mitigate the damage, and that is not what is going on here. So why have these costs gone up? Well, if you look on the right, you can see the top 5 shareholders in the water industries in the UK. This is not just Thames Water. This is all over the UK. And you can see that we've got multinational conglomerates. We've got a lot of pension funds. We've got banks. All of these people are essentially using the UK water industry as a method of making money. A public service should never be a method for making money. Realistically, a public service should technically lose money because it is providing a service that is required to the people. It is part of how our taxes should be used. It is not a private industry thing. Recently, Thames Water secured £3 billion in loans from some of their biggest contributors in order to try and stay afloat. They've now managed to stay afloat for another year. That's what they're projecting. But most of that money will go to paying off debt that they already have. Bearing in mind that water companies have around about £70 billion in debt, which is only increasing with the more that they borrow. And if we look at the graph on the bottom, we can see that over £210 billion have been invested in the water industry since 1989, with 83 billion of that being dividends paid out after the fact. The rest of that money has not been enough to keep England and Wales from having sewage being pumped into the rivers and from people having to execute emergency measures in order to make sure that they can actually drink clean water. It needs to be said time and time again that costs have gone up just to feed the greed. So what can we do about it? Well, Take Back Water is building on poll tax and Don't Pay UK techniques using mass non-payment of bills. 17 million people back in the day, back in Thatcher's day again, refused to pay the poll tax in sort of the late 80s. And that precipitated the downfall of the Thatcher government. That was one of the main things that caused the downfall of the Thatcher government. Fast forward to summer of 2022, and Don't Pay UK managed to garner 250,000 people in the UK to join a mass non-payment campaign in the face of an 80% energy price hike. Now, more than 3 million people had to stop paying either because they couldn't pay or because they were so disgruntled they didn't want to pay, they didn't think it was fair. And a memo was sent out by Eon Energy, as amongst other energy companies, that listed Don't Pay UK and more specifically the mass non-payment of bills as an existential threat to the industry. That's their words and not ours. And that memo, as we know from multiple reporters, was one of the reasons that Kwasi Kwarteng had to eventually step down, and the entire government went into this complete overindulgence of stopping everything and to try and limit that price hike. And that cost £44 billion to the state. If it had been already in public ownership, these utility bills, we wouldn't have had to pay that much money to stop all this. And we would already have a more robust system. So a mass non-payment campaign has worked in the past, but do people support it? Well, it seems so. 1 in 2 Britons see non-payment as a legitimate tactic. And not only that, but 82%, according to a YouGov poll, want some kind of public ownership of water, or at least a system similar to it. Now, we have ourselves over 10,000 pledged so far to strike. People are going to pledge to stop paying their direct debit. We have around about 40,000 leaflets that have been distributed across the country. And you may, especially if you've been in areas like London, and Liverpool, and Birmingham, you may well have seen our stickers as well up and around. We've got around about 15,000 stickers out as well. I myself am one of the main spokespeople for Take Back Water. I've been interviewed by the BBC. I've been interviewed by LBC, Independent, Times Radio, Novara Media. It seems that a lot of people are getting very, very interested in this. And the narrative from when I started taking interviews has shifted to, from, well, you know, this sort of mass non-payment campaign shouldn't happen, and to now interviewers saying, how long do you think it will be until people en masse stop paying their bills? So we can see that the tide really is turning for Take Back Water. So how do you want to get involved? How should you get involved? Well, thousands of people, like I said, have already pledged to strike back against water companies. And they are helping us out through leafleting mainly. So you can order leaflets and stickers, which you can distribute down to your own networks. I've done some leafleting myself, managed to talk to some people and had some really interesting conversations. We are based around London, but we are hoping to get sort of cells growing out in all over the country. We already have a few, especially in the sort of southeast and southwest. There is a community organizer meeting on Tuesday, the 29th of April, 7:30, and that will give you some idea of how to start your own sort of smaller groups in order to get the message out there. And then we'll also be doing lots of future assemblies, possibly some workshops as well and things like this. So you'll be able to get that information via emails from the campaign. So these are the sort of relevant socials and our website as well, which is www.takebackwater.uk. If you'd like to get involved, these are the best ways of doing it. You'll be able to find clips to share with friends and family, as well as information on what you can do and the consequences of taking mass non-payment alongside everybody else. So end the scam, take back our water. Thank you very much.
Brilliant. Thank you so much there, Joe, not just for speaking about what we can do, but also why it's important that we do something to sort of reclaim our ownership of water. And I think as we've seen sort of through this session here today, that globally, you know, not just here in the UK, our food systems, our land use systems, our access and right to water are fundamentally been taken over by corporate control, and these are all extrinsically linked. So yeah, just really thank you to all the speakers who joined for this session, and for everyone who's taken time over the lunch to engage. We have a few questions in. We only have a few minutes left, so we will look to try and answer them if we can in this time. So I have one for you, Joe, but I'll go to Sajeewa first, then we'll come back to you, Joe. So maybe in if we can, in around 5 minutes, two questions for Sajeewa, which is if the big corporations were to leave Sri Lanka, you know, would it be a positive, or is it now the country too dependent financially on the corporations? And then also be interested to explore the solar energy projects that are having negative repercussions for local farmers and their livelihoods. Could you summarize maybe the main negative impacts of these, and if there's any way that these projects can be turned around and be seen or be a net positive? So yeah, maybe about 5 minutes for those. I'll pass back over to Sajeewa.
සජීව එතකොට ඔයාලට තමයි මේ ප්‍රශ්නේ යොමු වෙන්නේ. ඒකෙන් කියවෙන්නේ
ඔව්
සජීව ඇහෙනවද මට?
ඇහෙනවා හරි. මේ ලක්ලිය ඔයා වෙන්නේ
එහෙනම් ප්‍රශ්නේ වෙන්නේ ඔයාට තමයි මේ ප්‍රශ්නේ යොමු වෙන්නේ. ස්කෝල මේ ඉස්සලම මේ අර ෆයිනෑන්ෂල් මේ ඔයාට උත්තරේ තියෙනවා.
ඔව් හරි මං කියන්න. ඒකෙන් වෙන බලපෑම්. ඔව් පළවෙනි එක තමයි දැන් අපේ සෝලා බලාගාරවල මේ ජලාශ මත ඉදි කරනකොට ප්‍රධානම ගැටලුව වෙලා තියෙන්නේ දැන් මේ වැව් කියලා කියන්නේ වැවක ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන්ම දීවර කර්මාන්තය කරනවා, ඒ වගේම කුෂි කර්මාන්තය සඳහා ජලය ලබා ගන්නවා, ඊට පස්සේ පානීය ජලය ලබා ගන්නවා. එතකොට මේ මත සෝලා ඉදි කරනවා කියලා කියන්නේ ඒ සෝලා ඉදි කිරීම සඳහා ෆ්ලෝටිං සෝලා ඉදි කිරීම සඳහා ෆ්‍රේම් පාවිච්චි කරනවා. ඒ ෆ්‍රේම් වලට ඇලුමිනියම් ෆ්‍රේම් පාවිච්චි කරන්නේ. එතකොට වෙන්නේ මේවා ට්‍රොපිකල් ප්‍රදේශ ඊට අමතරව මේවා ඩ්‍රයි සෝන් එක ඒවැ වැඩි කාලයක් අධික සූර්යතාපයට සහ ඒ වගේම ජල වාෂ්ප වලට මේ ඇලුමිනියම් ෆ්‍රේම් විවෘත වෙලා තියෙන හින්දා ඒවා කාදනය මේක නැත්නම් ඔක්සිකරණයේ ක්‍රියාවලිය වේගයෙන් සිද්ධ වෙනවා. ඒකේ ප්‍රතිඵලයක් විදියට වර්ෂා කාලයේදී ජලයට වැව් ජලයට සී ග්‍රේන් ඇලුමිනියම් අයන එකතු වීම සිද්ධ වෙනවා. එතකොට ඒවා ඍජුවම පානය කරන ජනතාවගේ ශරීරවලට එකතු වෙනවා. ඒවා බැරලෝහ විදියට. ඊට අමතරව මත්ස්‍යයින් හරහා නැවත වරක් මත්ස්‍යයින් ආහාරයට ගැනීම හරහා ශරීරවලට එකතු වෙනවා. එතකොට ඒක එක ප්‍රධානම ගැටලුවක් මේ සෝල බලාගාර ජලය මත ඉදිවෙන බලාගාර විදිහට ඉදිකිරීම හේතුවෙන් ඇති වෙන ප්‍රධාන එක තත්වයක්.
So, to the question about the solar panels on water, Saji would like to say that yes, it's harmful because these are waters which serve the agricultural community as much as people for their water resources for drinking. And these solar panels are resting on a frame which is made of aluminium, and during high sun, during the dry seasons, it gets corroded and mixes up with the ions are mixed up with the water. In the water, it gets corroded, and it releases these ions into the water, which is harmful to the fish which is living in the water, and the consumers which are consuming the fish later on, and of course for the people who drink. For all these reasons, and blocking the level of water like that it also affects the communities, immediate communities' livelihoods and their way of life and the quality of life. Of course, these solar panels do not give energy to them in the first place.
ඊට අමතරව
සජීව දෙවෙනි එක ප්‍රශ්නයක් උනේ මේ
ඔව්
Great. Thank you.
ප්‍රශ්නයක් උනේ අර මේ ලංකාවට මේ සමාගම්වල මේ ආයෝජන අපිට නැති වුණොත් එහෙම ලංකාව ඊටත් වැඩිය ආර්ථික අයනයකට පත් වෙනවා කියනවා.
ඔව් මම හිතන්නේ ඒ ප්‍රශ්නේදී ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන්ම තියෙන తත්වය තමයි ලංකාවට ප්‍රධාන වශයෙන්ම මේ ආයෝජන ව්‍යාපෘති වලින් ඇති වෙලා තියෙන්නේ ඒ කියන්නේ ජනතාවගේ භූමිය ස්වභාවික සම්පත් ඒවැය තියෙන මේ පද්ධතීන් සියල්ලම අත්පත් කර ගැනීම ඒ වගේම විශේෂයෙන්ම ජනතාවගේ ශ්‍රමය පවා එහෙම නැත්නම් ලේබර් පවා තාම හානිකර විදිහට ලබා ගැනීම සිද්ධ වෙලා තියෙනවා. ඉතින් ඒ හින්දා කිසිම ආකාරයකින් මේ ආයෝජන ව්‍යාපෘති නතර වීම හරහා ලොකු බිඳවැටීමක් වෙන්නේ නැහැ. මොකද දැනට බිඳවැටීම ඇති වෙලා තියෙන්නේ මේ කුෂිකාර්මික බිම් ජනතාවගෙන් අත්පත් කර ගැනීම ඒ වගේම කුෂිකාර්මික බිම් පමණක් නෙමේ ඒ කුෂිකාර්මාන්තයත් එක්ක බැඳිලා තියෙන ස්වභාවික සම්පත් අත්පත් කර ගැනීම හරහා සිද්ධ වෙන ලොකු බලපෑම් ක්‍රියාවලිය හරහා ජනතාව පීඩනයකට ලක් වෙලා ඉන්නවා. මොකද හේතුව තමයි මේ ආයෝජන ව්‍යාපෘති හරහා ලංකාවේ කොයිම වෙලාවකවත් මේ මන්ද පෝෂණය මේ දුරු වෙලා නැහැ. ඊට අමතරව ජනතාවට යලමහ දෙකන්නේ වගා කරන්න පුළුවන් තත්වයක් ඇති වෙලා නැහැ. ඊට පස්සේ මේ ආයෝජන හරහා ලංකාවේ ජනතාවගේ ජන ජීවිතය වර්ධනය වෙලා නැහැ. එතකොට අපිට පේනවා එහෙම නොවෙලා තියෙන තත්වයක් තුළ මේ භූමි ප්‍රදේශ නැවත වරක් ජනතාවට ලබා දීම හරහා මේවා ගොඩනගන්න පුළුවන් වෙනවා. මිසක් ඒවා බිඳවැටීමක් සිද්ධ වෙන්නේ නැහැ. දැනට තමයි මේ බිඳවැටීම ඇති වෙලා තියෙන්නේ.
To the first question about finance, enriching the economy of Sri Lanka through these large-scale development schemes and plantations, Sajeewa would say that yes, it may bring in some money for investment, but of course it destroys the livelihoods at the same time and the quality of life and much more disruption which we cannot pay off. It will be the future generations who will have to pay off. So if the financial investments are taken away, yes, of course, we would be better off in a way because we would be able to build our own infrastructure, own economies, own agriculture, small-scale livelihoods, so that we will be much better off in the sense that we will be grounded in the ways of economy that we know, and it will be sustainable as much as protecting the environment, biodiversity, and agency of our own life.
Brilliant. Thank you. Thank you so much. And I hope that helps answer the question in the Q&A, because it's a really important question for Sri Lanka and so many sort of other countries that can sort of have had that corporate influence, over their land and other systems, and how dependent they become on them. So really important question to explore. I'm going to pass to Joe now, and Joe, I'm going to give you a couple minutes. So apologies for the rush on this, but there's a question in the chat which was about, is Take Back Water backing the MP Clive Lewis's private members' water bill, pressing for nationalisation of the water industry to be back on the agenda? And then there's a couple of comments around a couple of fears of not paying their bills as well. So maybe a quick comment around that, but apologies for the rush nature of.
Yeah, no worries. They're very common questions, so thankfully I've got some pretty stock answers, so it's all good. I think Take Back Water, and I'm fairly sure I can talk about, I can sort of talk on behalf of all of them at Take Back Water. We are supportive of a bill to have a conversation about a nationalisation of the water industry, and indeed utilities as a whole. But we're not explicitly, I suppose, going to throw weight behind it, just because it has been sort of classically not a good idea, or at least not particularly useful to try and get this done from the top down. We would love that to be the case, but it seems that we've tried so many different avenues of doing this, including like writing letters to MPs and giving people the sort of like a letter template to send out, and that hasn't worked. Sort of trying to get into conversations with MPs and talking to them hasn't really worked. So we're going to do the organising from the ground up, and hopefully we'll be able to, sort of meet in the middle and be able to do both of those tactics. So that'd be a statement on it. In terms of the dangers of not paying your water bill, it's a very interesting one, because if you are in the unfortunate circumstance of being in debt, one of the things that financial advisors will say to you is stop paying your water bill, because it is not legal in this country, thankfully, to have your water turned off if you're not paying bills. That's you can't have that happen to you. And indeed, what they can do is obviously send out things like debt collection letters and stuff like that, which look an awful lot scarier than they are. I want to bear in mind that Don't Pay UK had an awful lot of people who completely stop paying their bills, and the energy utilities are an awful lot more litigious. They tend to get more sort of lawyered up, I suppose, than the water industry does. And we still had people who are thousands of pounds in energy debt, supposedly. Indeed, I knew a couple of them, and they had no issues at all in sort of agreeing a payment plan. And we've got a lot of information that we've had based on previous experience about how to make this whole debt collection process a lot slower. So how to slow down the sort of flow of information, and that will obviously be released as and when we need to. But the main thing to remember is that as much as it's not only is it not as dangerous as not paying things like energy bills, but the more people that get involved, the less dangerous it becomes, which I understand is scary, because you don't want to be the sort of one person left holding the bomb. But there is already a lot of people who want to do this, a lot of people who think it's a good idea. Like I said, 50% of Britons do think it's a good idea. So there's not as much of a danger as you think there is, and there's certainly not as much of a danger as you are being told there is by certain figures in the media and the water industry.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Joe. And thanks again to all the speakers. And I'd encourage, if there's more you want to find out about these campaigns and more questions you have around these things, either, get in touch with us or find the ways to get in touch with the organizations directly as well. And we'll share the links, and we'll share everything in an email over the next couple of days, probably tomorrow, could be Friday, probably tomorrow, hopefully. We'll be back again, 28th of May, and always the last Wednesday of every month. Our next session will focus on our right to energy and our right to clean, affordable energy. And the session after that will focus on our broken economic systems. And the information will come out in the next couple of weeks as well. So thank you so much for joining us, every attendee here today. Thank you to all the speakers who have joined us as well. And yeah, hopefully this has been informative. And I'm looking forward to engage with everyone as we continue this series of visions for a global Green New Deal. Hopefully I'll see as many of you as possible on Saturday for the Landworkers Alliance mobilization, Food in Our Hands too. But for now, I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and thanks once again for coming. And yeah, we will win eventually, but we'll never stop trying, that's for sure. But yeah, thanks everyone. Solidarity.